Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 151, and I'm very honored to have Michael Sweeney on here, composer, arranger. Michael, thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's a treat to be here and quite an honor. Thanks a lot.
So we're going to go through a lot of your music, both in concert band and jazz band, and we have some member questions that people have asked and some other kind of random questions. And there's so many things here. And I was just mentioning to you off air, like I was super lucky. My director of music arranged for Wynton Marsalis to stop by our band room, like on the way to the gig yesterday. So in 2 days, I've met. You're being put in the same category as Wynton Marsalis, like
Oh my
Wynton
gosh.
Marsalis yesterday and Michael Sweeney today. So
Now I'm really nervous.
I know, right? You probably don't play the trumpet as well as him. I'm just going to guess.
No, no.
I know I do not. I have a statement that I wanted to say, and I told you this ahead of time. Hopefully, you're okay with it. I'm going to just put aside your work as a composer right now, just your work as an arranger. I mean, I'm 44, I think, and I remember as long as I can remember having arrangements of your jazz band music. And I'll say this: my statement is, people say this about Wynton too, that I think you fundamentally changed jazz education. I'll say music education because it's the same thing in the concert band side, because of the amount of literature that is too hard for young students that you make accessible in an amazing way. And I don't know how you do it. You have that knack of taking something, getting the essence of the music out, and all that. So this is my humble thank you as a band director to all the writing you've always done and continue to do.
Well, thank you so much. That's very kind. And 44, I've been with Hal Leonard now 42 years. So that makes me feel a little bit old, but it's really gratifying to hear that the music works. It's always been a goal of mine to make music accessible and work for young kids. And I think that's so important. And if we're able to accomplish that, then that makes this worthwhile.
All right. So our first question is a little bit of your training as a composer. Like where did you get started, and who are your sort of models?
Oh man, it depends on how far back you want to go. My mom was a band director and then a music teacher. So I started pretty early on, even middle school. I started dabbling with arranging, learning the hard way about instrument transpositions and all of that. Had very supportive band directors along the way that encouraged me to write things, and I got a chance to try them with the bands. So it was a process that started pretty early. I went to school at Indiana University as a music education major, not a composition major, but still wrote a lot along the way. And I took composition classes while I was in college too. So just a little bit of everything. Got a chance to write for the IU marching band and pep band and the jazz bands there as well. So it's kind of a combination, started way back.
It's funny you're talking about encouraging, like you were encouraged. You had people in your life who said, "Hey, Michael, would you write for us?" And all of us are thinking about those kids. We're like, I would never have that kid write for me. But and I'll say it again. Wynton yesterday said the same thing, like encouraging young people to jump on the band and to play. So and when I've talked to other composers, they say the same thing. They were given early opportunities to write for the bands that they were a part of.
Absolutely. I think that nurturing early on makes all the difference in the world.
One of our members, Tom, has asked a question. I'm hoping this is okay. We throw this in here because it seems to fit. Who was your composing inspiration?
Boy, there's so many to think about, and really my listening habits were pretty eclectic back from the early days of the Beatles. Then got into jazz listening with, of course, Miles and Herbie Hancock, Count Basie. I started really listening to those folks. So I can't really point to one area or one person. As far as classical, I remember the first time I was in a band that played Percy Grainger, and I just knocked out, what are these sounds? What are these chords? Things like Schumann's George Washington Bridge really opened my ears to polytonality, and then of course Stravinsky. I mean, I think I draw from just so many different areas, and it depends on the mood of the music. I'm able to draw from, I think, a lot of different areas. Hopefully, not stealing too much directly, but
well, so I'm
but I
just
think a
saying
lot of
this.
background.
10 days ago, I had a concert in one of my bands. We did Dark Forest Overture. Black Forest Overture. Right,
Uh-huh.
and you mentioned the polytonal writing of Schumann. Well, that's right through there as well. So you can see that transfer like right through.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I always try to look for new harmonic ways of treating things. It seems to me that I mean, there's so much band music out there now, and a lot of it just still sounds the same to me. So a goal of mine was to get out of that sameness and just try new things and new harmonies, new textures, just as a way of keeping things interesting. If nothing else for me, I kind of a short attention span, so it's nice to try things fresh and new.
So the big question is how, and of course you can't actually answer this, but getting the essence of the music even at the younger band level. Let's treat it as an arranger for now. Like, how do you approach taking? Let's take the A Train, which is obviously one of the masterworks by Duke Ellington, and then you can make that accessible for a middle school band to play. Like, what is your thought process and how you are able to do that?
Well, I think no matter what level you approach and you're writing for, you really have to understand each instrument. I think that's where writers that write strictly on a keyboard get tangled up sometimes. But and then this came from my being a band director and working with beginning kids. You have to know each instrument, what each instrument's capable of, where the sweet spot is, what they can do, what they can't do, what they might stumble on. So I think that's always in the background for me as far as, right, what can kids at this particular level, what can they handle easily? I mean, we're going to be throwing style and rhythms at them anyway. And if you get out of what they can physically handle at any particular stage of development, I think that's really the key. One of them is the key, of course, finding the right spot that's going to, their instruments are going to sound best and what they've learned up to that point. So yeah, it's really hard to nail down one thing, but it's a combination of knowing all the instruments, knowing the kids at that particular level, and what they're capable of.
And sometimes you can just say, okay, let's take a main melody, like take the A Train, and then okay, so how, besides putting it in the right key and all this, what notes can I take away and keep the essence of the melody? What is essential to be there? What
Right.
instead of sometimes you'll even, instead of like something syncopated, you'll make it more straight, right? But it totally works. So
I
maybe that's
find,
experience.
yeah, I find that when you're simplifying complicated rhythms, you still have to use characteristic patterns. I mean, you can't just dumb it down to quarters and eighths. It still has to be whatever pattern you're simplifying it to, it has to be characteristic and stylistically accurate to that particular genre. I mean, yeah, you can. I try to find landing points, so for example, everything isn't on an upbeat, but you can still do, and maybe the upbeats are handled in some other section, some other part of the band. So it's a fine line of knowing how much you can simplify, and the end result still has to be convincing and still has to be stylistically accurate.
Can I ask a question? I don't know. You and I have not talked about this at all, so I might be putting my foot in my mouth, or I don't know. And I know all the work you do for Hal Leonard. One of the things I notice as a band director, and I won't say all publishers because I know every publisher is different with this. When we talk about articulation, this is not on our list. I just kind of was striking me, and you're like the perfect person to tell me. A lot of times when we look at concert band literature, and we always say we're playing what's on the page. But then a lot of times when you look in jazz band literature, there's all these extra phrase mark slurs, but we actually have to articulate more than what's on there. And I think jazz publishers have started, I guess, doing more of that um, as time goes on. Over the years, like if you look back to older arrangements, it's more like these long slurs, and now more are notated. So I think it's a question, but also a point to band directors that just because you're doing an arrangement that has all of these notes slurred, it doesn't mean it's a slur. You actually have to change them, right? So how do you guys balance that?
Oh man, that's a great question, and I think you're right. I think it has changed over the years how we approach articulation, and yeah, particularly in jazz, more so in concert band. There's room for stylistic interpretation. You really have to understand the genre and
Mm-hmm.
the smoothness of the eighth notes, usually shortness of the quarter notes. And it gets down to it's a writer to writer. I mean, some writers like to put in a lot of long slurs. We don't automatically take those out. We try to give writers within our own guidelines, room to express things how they want to. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right that teachers really need to understand that they need to stylistically. What's on the page really is a roadmap. It gives you hopefully a good idea of where to start. But yeah, yeah, a lot of people write phrases not meaning specifically slurs. So it's a funny story back when I was working with Sammy Nestico. This goes back way early in my Hal Leonard days. He would send in charts with no articulations at all. And I would say, Sammy, we need to put some articulations. They say, well, Mike, people know my music, they know how it goes. And I tried to say, well, young teachers may not know that. So can we please put in a few articulations? So we used to beg him to be able to put some articulations in. And that's, people have to listen and they have to study the genre to be able to understand that. We try to take some of that guesswork out by, notating things smartly and correctly, and at least give people a good place to start. But no right answer there. It's a tough one.
The people who would consider themselves jazz players or strong jazz teachers probably know, okay, I'm not going to do that. We're going to tongue this note because it's before the rest, or hey, whatever the rules that you're going to follow, or tongue the offbeat, third of the onbeat, whatever you're doing. But for the people who are not as experienced, I guess my suggestion would be take the demo recording and literally just notate all of the lead lines the way you hear them play it, and ignore what's there. So then you can teach your kids to do that. You can either mark the parts ahead of time, or, just tell them in rehearsal to do it. So people, they just take what the recording is. You said, listen, right? I mean, it just takes the time to do it.
It's there. Yeah. And all the demo recordings are typically really good from all publishers these
Sure.
days. So yeah, that's a great model to look at that and just see how it's played and mark it accordingly.
Yeah. Okay, so question I had here is things band directors should consider when choosing the repertoire for their ensembles. I know it probably feels like a weird question to ask as like a composer, right? Like, oh, you should choose all my music. Like that's not what we're looking for. But obviously you've done a ton of honor bands. You've listened to countless bands over the years. Like successes when they're choosing repertoire, things that maybe we fall into as pitfalls.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think these days choosing literature is incredibly difficult just because of the mountain of music that's out there. Technology and, the people able to self-publish. I mean, there's J.W. Pepper used to tell us that they received over 2,000 submissions a year
Mm.
just in concert band alone. I know that may have been 10 years ago. So it's only grown from there. So just the overwhelming amount of music, I can't imagine being a teacher these days and trying to wade through all of this and find. So that's challenge number one. I think you have to be careful too when you're looking at self-publishing, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there are a lot of really fine composers who do self-publish. However, realize that the music that's self-published doesn't go through an editorial filter. Uh, I have some of the, like Brian Balmages and Bob Sheldon are fantastic editors in addition to writers on their own. And with Alfred and Hal Leonard, goes through several steps, and by the time it finally gets published, you can count on the accuracy and the consistency of level, and those things you have to be a little more careful of when you're looking at self-publishing. And I don't want to discourage people from looking at all avenues. We talked a little bit earlier. There's so much good music out there now.
It's amazing.
The challenge is how do you find the time to listen? And I mean, I'm amazed that people are able to find anything with the amount that's out there. So I think you have to. It's important to look for things that make a connection to yourself. If it doesn't connect with you, you can't pass that along to your students. I mean, if it's not something that you can relate to them, that music is your connection with the kids, and if you can share that bond, I think that's critical. So you've got to find something that speaks to you musically or emotionally, and then you can portray that to the kids. Kids pick up on that. If you're just throwing music at them that you don't care about, they're going to pick up on that real quick, and they're not going to care about it either. So you got to take the time, I think, and look and find those pieces that you can really relate to and dig into and make some sort of connection. One other thing, and we could talk about programming for hours.
Ever. Yeah.
But too many directors, I think, look at the upper edge of what their kids can play rather than balancing with some easier pieces where you can focus on the musicality and bringing them to a high performance level. If they never get to what a high performance level feels like, that's something that I think the kids really need to experience. And I do that a lot with honor bands too. I'll always program at least a 2 or 3 way easier pieces than probably what they were used to playing. But you take it to a high level and you can do a high degree of musicianship. So you don't always have to play hard stuff. There are some really effective and sophisticated sounding pieces that are easier where you can focus on the musicality and the tone and the emotion of the piece and not always feel like you're chasing notes. So
One I'm
balance.
gonna say of yours that pops into my mind is when you say that is your I think it's a grade 1.5 of Ye Banks of Praise Bonnie Doon. Like, it's gorgeous, and I know you love that style of music. It's yeah, it's the timbre is different from the original, but like you can teach all the same stuff, and it's so easy
Right.
technically.
Yeah, so I think directors need to balance.
Yeah.
Obviously you need to challenge the kids, but yeah, give them something easier that you can really grow with. That's a great idea.
One thing I've had Terry White's help with and some other people is that there's so much music. Terry always says it's really nice when somebody recommends, hey, this worked really well for my kids. So I know we all have friends that do that. But on this podcast, we've done a lot of those episodes where we kind of go, hey, here's a bunch of music that some members are recommending, and people can listen to them on the episode to see if they fit with their band. Also, let's talk about like the strengths and weaknesses of the band, right? If we have band directors, a lot of times go, oh, I love that. It's a great trumpet part. Well, you only have one trumpet player and they can't play those notes. So like thinking
Right.
about the strengths and weaknesses of your band, how do you hide those and and, and bring them out?
Yeah, there's only so much you can do there, and I think directors really you have to look at the scores. I mean, you can't just listen to a piece. You've got to dig in and see, all right, where are the demands? Where is it going to fit by band? Where is it not? I guess if it doesn't fit, you can always look at our flex band series where there's a lot of alternatives and
Yeah,
options there. But yeah, that's tricky. If you've got a smaller program and you've got some particular weaknesses, you have to be very, very careful. I mean, as writers, we can't always write it completely safe where you can play it with any section of your band being weak. Some pieces just naturally feature more, different instrument sections than others. So
yeah.
I think that as directors, you got to look at the scores very carefully and make sure you know what's there.
Make sure it fits your kids. And like a lot of us do, but like it's okay to substitute. Okay, here's four measures that kind of sits in the altos, and this is it. I want to do the piece. If I just write those four out and maybe put it in some clarinets who are resting, just for this small section, you're not changing the music, but you're just beefing that up. Little bit of arranging here and there, I think you can definitely go too far. But thinking about that will help your
Yeah.
band.
That's not for us, that's not a copyright issue at all.
Yeah,
If you buy the piece of music, our thinking is do what you have to make it work with your kids.
right.
You need to rearrange some parts, rewrite some things, by all means. Our goal is to make it work for you folks.
Perfect. Let's get to some member questions. Some people, let's see, we got five of them who just had some questions. And if these are quick answers, that's fine, or longer answers is fine too. All right, first one is Michelle. This is actually Michelle Fernandez, our good friend.
Yeah.
How did you end up getting that magical job of editor at Hal Leonard? And how do you find time and energy to create when you're reviewing everybody else's work?
All right. Hi, Michelle. And sometimes the job doesn't feel that magical, but I think in reality, I'm very fortunate the way things worked out. It started way back, I suppose, when I was writing for bands when I was in college. One of the bands I wrote for a lot of Indiana bands, marching band, and some jazz things too. Uh, but one of the directors, Herman Knoll at Greenwood High School, was kind of a legendary Indiana band director. He then went to Indiana State, and then he was hired at Hal Leonard, and then they were needing another editor, and he knew of my work in Indiana, so he called me and said if I wanted the job. So it was kind of uh, being connected in the right
Mhm.
place and having the experience that they were looking for. So it was I guess that Indiana connection that helped me out.
That's great. And I think the other part of that was how do you find the energy to write your own stuff when you're reviewing other people's stuff? You
Yeah,
just kind of segment it.
that's hard. It's my job at Hal Leonard is strictly editorial and management, marketing, and working with the writers. So the writing I do is all outside of business hours. So that's really challenging. More weekends, I suppose. That's I've learned to write in little short bursts of
Mm.
time. I can't sit and write for a long time. Yeah, I've
What's a short amount of time? What are you talking?
an hour,
An
15
hour?
minutes, 20 minutes. I suppose if I sit for more than an hour, I get squirrely and have to get up and do something else.
Do you write like full band, or do you write like a section and then leave it and then come back and fill stuff in? And
It's usually a sketch starts first. First comes an idea. What type. Get a scope of the piece. What's the shape? What's the emotional shape? What's the mood? Then you start filling in the parts. And I still do a pencil sketch. Uh, and then gradually flesh out the parts, and then eventually do a fuller sketch. But yeah, it's gradual here. I find it's always handy to do a bit and set it aside, let my subconscious work on it for a bit, then come back and change what I don't like and try to find some spots that I do like. So it's a long process for me.
All right. Crystal asks, favorite composition. Is that like naming your favorite child?
Absolutely, it is.
Okay.
I suppose you'll get an idea of some of the pieces that we listen to later, but yeah, it's impossible to pick a
All right.
favorite.
That's fair.
Sorry.
All right. Ron asks, what grade three band composition are you most pleased with? Maybe that's the same answer. Is there a
Yeah,
grade
it's
three
tough.
that you like the most?
I think there are. I mean, there are always pieces that I seem to come back to more
Yep.
for honor bands, and I guess those are ones that I'm more comfortable with. Like an Earth Dance is always pops up as
That's the one I was going to say. Like if I could choose a grade three, that's the one that pops up in my head.
yeah. The other one I use quite a bit is the Quad City Stomp. It's
Hmm.
kind of a fun one, a little different too. But yeah, it's hard to single it out and maybe get some ideas when we
Well,
listen to some
I
of
mean,
these.
we were trying to like nail down what ones to look at for you, and like I'm going through, I'm like, there's just like your body of work is just immense, so that's a good thing.
Well, if you stay in the business long enough, things start to add
Yeah,
up. I
yeah,
guess you
yeah, of
just
course.
can't help it.
What instrument combination timbre have you found most pleasing?
Uh, that's a tough one too. I don't know that have one combination. It depends on the piece, the style, the mood of the piece, and I'm always looking for new combinations, slightly unusual.
Hmm.
So it's a mix. I try to
So
again
what
find the right pocket of sound for each instrument.
what's a newer combination that you've started playing with?
Oh, I don't. Well, there's one, a Silverbrook, which I think we'll listen to later. Starts with muted trumpets and xylophone, playing just repeated notes. So it's a little different. So if I can slip in, some different textures here and there, always looking for something. I don't really know that I have a go-to.
Hmm.
I mean, I like combining clarinets with horns and that type of thing. But it's hard to say any particular combination. It's so dependent on the piece.
Well, xylophone and muted trumpet. You're just checking for our intonation ears, right? We're just
There
seeing
you
if we
go.
can make that happen. Yeah. Okay. Nathan says, "What am I supposed to do with all these extra chopsticks I bought for Ancient Voices?" You can tell I've never done Ancient Voices. I know we featured it, but what's the story here?
Well, usually it's pencils. I have that's it's interesting that he
Yeah.
found chopsticks. He might consider maybe some takeout for the band, And
All right, we got one more. Elise says, "What would you tell the middle school version of yourself looking back?"
oh man, well, I'd probably start by saying, "Don't be a jerk." uh, then probably tell myself that hey, you're probably not going to make a career out of being a professional trombone player. So start thinking of alternatives now. Uh, the other thing would be if I listen closer to the teachers that I had throughout my career. I had some great teachers, including Ray Kramer at Indiana, and I think back, says, man, there must have been some incredible nuggets of wisdom that he imparted to us, and I was just goofing around back there in the second trombone section and not paying attention like I should have.
Not
So
just the
we'll start
trombone
there.
section, the second trombone section.
The
Yeah.
second trombone section, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna get into some of your music. And so everybody knows we have a bunch here. We're gonna do concert band and jazz band. And we're going from grade one to grade four. We're kind of gonna go. You want to go in like easier to harder, or you want to go harder to easier, or skip
Yeah,
around, or what do you want to do?
I suppose it makes sense to start easy and go hard.
All right. So if people don't want to listen to the easy stuff, boo on you. But we're gonna get to it. Okay. So the first piece is Imperium from 1992. It's grade one. I'm just gonna mention we featured this in episode 138, grade one literature, when I was with Terry White. So some people
Okay.
might have heard this already. So tell us a little bit about this piece.
This is one of those pieces where early on in my career, I thought it would be really cool if some of the contemporary techniques could be applied then to younger kids. I mean, that's so much of what you think of as younger music is just bland, and we dumb it down so the kids can play it to the
Like you
point where
mentioned
it's,
earlier with George Washington Bridge. Yeah.
yeah, it's not interesting for the kids. And I think there's no reason why they can't understand and appreciate, minor sounds, clusters, dissonance, different types of. I mean, these Imperium has some uneven phrase shapes, uh, different layering techniques. So I tried, and really the inspiration for Imperium was kind of Macbeth's mask, if you remember that from many, many years ago. I thought, how
Yep.
cool is this? I mean, that really made an impression on me. And so Imperium is sort of, like to capture that flavor of a piece, uh, not, nothing traditional form wise, but just kind of a evolving type piece, but kind of in that genre. See if I can make that happen for young kids.
Love it. So as we listen to it, I did want to mention, and I know this is a Chose piece. On, am I allowed to like another piece that's not Hal Leonard? Is that okay on this?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm working right now with one of our bands on Cenotaph, which is like full by Jack Stamp, which is full of some of these compositional techniques, which is fun. Question I had, as you mentioned, Francis Macbeth, is other composers that are older composers, maybe not alive, that a lot of young teachers may not even know exist. And I didn't like who pops into your brain. I had two, and I might steal what you think of. Frank Erickson and Claire Grundman. Are there,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
others?
Well, Macbeth, I think, doesn't get played as much as
Yeah.
what he used to. Alfred Reed, I think, is more the upper level, but just there's such a mastery of scoring for the usage of the full wind band. Nobody does it
Mm.
better than Alfred Reed. Grunman that you mentioned, of course, and Frank Erickson. I think, yeah, those are. I would agree with all of those.
All right, let's listen to Imperium. So the next piece has, you said, almost a million views for a concert band piece to have a million views. Yeah,
I was shocked
Celtic
when I
Air and
looked at that.
Dance,
Yeah.
Celtic Air and Dance. And is there a sequel to it as well that I've
There
heard?
are, yeah, there are probably way too many sequels.
Okay,
I think I'm up to five. I think I'm going to stop now.
okay,
Yeah,
but you really like Celtic music.
I do, and that's I found myself appreciating that music. So then I decided to take a deep dive, and now I'm totally obsessed with traditional Irish music. I play in weekly pub sessions, the Balron, and also I've got dozens of whistles. So yeah, it qualifies as a disease now.
I will say that for Celtic Air and Dance, that kids love it. I've done it. My wife's done it. And a lot of people have done it by the views, and it's just great. One of the things that I had my kids do, because I was trying. This was right after COVID, and they were much older than most kids who usually play this. But I was trying to get them to play something because they hadn't played together in 2 years, and they made up this storyline about there was like a love story, and then there was an evil stepmother and a father, and like the wedding was the dance, the jig at the end, and like all this stuff that they made up, which was a super cool imagery thing. So,
Wow.
yeah, tell us from your perspective a little bit about the piece.
Well, there's so much rich melodies in Irish music that's it's fun to take a melody and maybe find a little different angle on it. Just the format of a lyric start, then a dance section seems to be such a satisfying format. And these pieces really lend themselves to that. In this one, the Parting Glass, of course, is the first tune, one of the really beautiful melodies. And even in the slower section, I tried to put a little grit. There's some half step rubs in there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big percussion build that kind of peaks in an unexpected place. So I'm trying not to just do standard treatments, but trying to find different ways of treating these tunes and giving them some emotional build. Even for music for first, second year players, they can appreciate music that goes somewhere, that just doesn't stay the same place. That it's got to have some emotional form to it, so the piece is going somewhere. So that's kind of what I was hoping to do with the Celtic Air Dance.
I agree 100%. And I also mentioned a piece like this is brilliant as a standalone piece, but it also works great on a piece, on a program. If you have a band where maybe you're not ready to do a full ballad, you do what's the slow section? A minute 20, something
Something like
like
that.
that.
Yeah, right.
So you can do expressive music, but you could do then maybe this could even be a middle tune. It could be like your Granger S kind of thing, and with a march and then a closing tune. So like you don't have to a full ballad. This kind of gets you into the ballad land without, because sometimes ballads are just so hard with
Yeah,
kids.
kids sometimes have a hard time relating to
Yeah.
ballads.
Yeah. So this is like a ballad, but not just a ballad, right? So, all right, here it is, Celtic Air and Dance. All right, so we're into the grade 2.5 land with Silverbrook. I just made a note that at a point, and I could be completely inappropriate on this, so tell me if I'm wrong. The men in Canzona like kind of snap at me at some point. I don't know if that was intentional or not. There was a point of the piece that I kind of reminded me of that. And I also found it was very cinematic.
It does have a lot of changes in style. That was purposeful on this. It was written for a school. I knew they were going to combine and have about 400 kids play this.
Wow.
So I thought, well, what can we do that would sound really cool with 400 kids? So this piece has probably my longest introduction ever. It's like 50 some measures before you get to the main theme, but it's evolving. This is the one that starts with the muted trumpets and the xylophone and kind of builds from there. But yeah, it goes through lots of different styles, and I think it's only 4.5 minutes. But for that reason, I end up using this a lot for honor bands because you're able to touch on lots of different styles. Trying to think what else is in there. There are some unexpected things that you'll find a lot of polychords in this one as well. But yeah, it's a kind of a dramatic ending as well.
I will mention to people if they're listening to this in their car on the audio podcast, when we put this on YouTube, as most of these have, like with the other episodes we've done, have a YouTube link. So if you watch it, you're getting to see the score and sound at the same time. So I'll just make that plug. All right, let's listen to some of Silverbrook. All right. And on any of these, if we're not playing the full recording, you are welcome to go to the YouTube links and subscribe to all those and check them out. Our next piece is Prelude and Pursuit, which is sort of your take on incantation and dance at the grade 2 level, 2.5.
Yeah, that's interesting. The commissioning school, this was in North Carolina, and the chairman of the commissioning committee had actually played in the Greensboro, North Carolina high school band under Chance
Wow.
and got to play incantation and dance before it was published, when it was kind of workshopping when he was in residence there using the percussion section. So I thought, boy, it'd be kind of cool for this commission piece to pay tribute to him and to incantation and dance, which was really an influential piece in my early years as well. So I didn't take any of Chance's melodies or structures specifically, but kind of the intent. We start with kind of a chant, then it grows from there. The percussion then comes in with they're setting up the rhythms that then will be played by the band. Chance was really amazing. You figure out how much percussion he relied on early in band, when typically band pieces at that time were snare drum, bass drum, and maybe a crash cymbal. I mean, he used, the full complement of percussion. I think was way ahead of his time. So I used some of these similarities in flavor and tonalities are there, but it's musically not related, but just form and structure. It has interesting things, some cluster places where I ask the kids they can play whatever note they want, but the rhythm they play is very specific and very specific dynamics, but they can choose whatever notes. So there are some effects that kind of build from there, where you have just a cacophony of sound, then it ends up leading into a unison. So I tried different techniques and effects in creating this piece. It was kind of fun. It's not one that sold that particularly well. Maybe it's too different. I don't know, but it was one we had fun doing, and it was kind of a nice tribute to Chance and incantation and dance.
It is funny. I was just listening to a band doing one of his pieces recently, an honor band, and yes, that we think of as a lot of percussion. But if you look at pieces now, it's not. It's. I mean, you're right. It was ahead of its time, but now, see,
Right,
that's why a lot of his music is still so great. Because if you're looking for standard band rep that's a little bit older, but you have 6 percussionists that you want to keep busy,
right.
It's great.
Some scoring things have
Yeah,
changed a lot over the years.
that's right. Percussionists are people too. Yeah.
There you go.
All right, here's Prelude in Pursuit. Okay, the next piece is going to be Down by the Sally Gardens, which is a grade 2 ballad.
This gets back to kind of my obsession with Irish music again, and just trying to come up with a very emotional setting of this beautiful tune that really could be played at a grade 2 level. And I think with this piece in particular, you can teach kids about peaks and valleys, and it has two main peaking points. The other thing about this piece is the melody is constantly moving. So when I'm doing this with honor bands, I'm constantly directing kids of where to listen to, and it's always be aware of who has a melody at any given point. It may change every 2 or 4 measures. So they really have to listen and understand their role in the ensemble. Are they the melody? Are they a counterline? Whatever it is, they understand the melody has to be heard and that adjust their dynamics accordingly. So it's a piece that I use a lot of teaching to for listening and understanding your own role within an ensemble. I found that's with the emotional tug of this, even high schools and colleges have used this piece. And it's hopefully an example that an easy piece can also sound sophisticated and be effective by its own.
And it's also great when you find a piece where everybody gets the melody, or a lot of people get the melody. It keeps everybody on their toes and they feel important. So sounds like a trombone player writing it.
There you
A
go.
second trombone player. All right, here's Down by the Sally Gardens. Okay, so the next one is going to be the second movement of Lincolnshire Prosy, arranged grade 2.5 level Hork-style Grange. If people don't know, movements 1 and 6 have also been done by you, Lost Lady Found, and oh shoot, what's the movement one called?
Lisbon.
Lisbon, that's right. I saw this at an honor band one time. My friend Jean Quinn is a fantastic middle school teacher, and she did a warm up because Hork-style Grange uses all the different meters. She did a concert B flat scale, and they could only change notes to the next scale note when she went to beat one. So she'd do like a 4/4 measure, and then a 2/4, and then a 3/4, and then a 5/4. So they had to really watch her because she knew that as a middle school teacher,
Ah,
90% of it was like you have to watch the conductor through all of this. So tell
there's a
us about,
novel
yeah,
concept.
how do you take Percy Granger grade 5 and like make this sound? There's times when I hear this and I forget that it's your arrangement of it.
This was actually harder. I thought, well, Hork-style Grange, it's a ballad. How hard could it be? Well, I found out how
Yeah,
hard it
right.
could be. Uh, I think there's danger in any time we try to do transcription of famous or classic band works. And I know there's been a lot of criticism for people trying to do that. I think the first step is you got to pick a piece that you can whittle down to a younger level without changing the integrity of the piece itself. If you have to change things that change the character of the piece, then you probably shouldn't have done that piece to begin with. Which is why I only did certain movements of Lincolnshire. Some of them you just can't do at that particular level.
We were just joking that you didn't do the third movement.
There you go. But this one, I probably worked harder on this than I've done on many of my original works, just looking at the original score and sorting out first, what key is going to work for kids and still sound okay, uh, which lines to keep, where to put the lines. There's nothing that's been added. There's nothing original in here that's not Granger's. And I try to keep all of his harmonies and his lines intact. So it's meant to be as authentic sounding as absolutely possible. Um,
We've also mentioned Eubanks and Braze. Like, how many Granger transcriptions, like off the top of your head, about how many have you done? We've mentioned four, but
Actually, the Eubanks and Braze was not meant as a transcription. I mean, we always
okay,
associate Granger with that piece, and it certainly has some of that flavor. But I kind of took it a little different direction, although
understood. Yeah,
so that's not really meant to be a transcription. But the three from Lincolnshire are the really only ones Granger I've done. I did a little bit of the whole first suite, a couple movements there that
yes, that's amazing as well.
more truncated.
Done
And
that, yeah.
again, there it's a matter of maintaining the integrity of the form, which is so critical to that first movement, and compressing that in a convincing setting for young kids. But my thinking is, why shouldn't we expose younger kids to some of this great literature?
Yeah.
They may or may not ever be able to be in an ensemble that can handle the original works. So I think they're going to miss out if we don't give them some introduction in a smart and authentic way. I mean, there's a danger, there's so many bad transcriptions out there that kind of give these a bad name, but if done correctly, and other folks have done some great ones too, I think can be very effective. And I think it's important to show different historical periods for the kids.
And there is a trumpet solo in this, like any good piece should have. Is there? I'm not looking at the score right now. Is it cued anywhere else, or is it trumpet only?
Yeah, the trumpet solo is not cued. It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and very exposed. I mean, not crazy hard,
Yep.
but they need a big sound and
Yeah, it's exposed. So the range is comfortable.
yeah.
But yeah, you're going to need a trumpet player to do this.
So some people right now are like, "Ooh, I have a band for that." Yeah. All right, here's Hork-style Grange. Okay, so the next piece, I love it, but even more importantly, my wife loves it. So Earth Dance is great. I wrote, it's an amazing piece. I even like the end, it's like kind of comes out of nowhere to me. It's like kind of, I'd like to hear more from you about what the end kind of signifies. To me, it kind of has more of that pop harmony kind of sound when the beginning is like totally different. And as you mentioned, there's
Right.
a lot going on.
Yeah, I think I find in a lot of my pieces, they tend to start darker and more minor or different flavor. And then by the end, it evolves into a lighter, more major. I don't know if, I don't think I do that on purpose, but maybe it's just a kind of a natural growth or progression of the emotion through the piece where a lot of them start minor and end major, which is definitely the case here. Earth Dance is a case where the commissioning school said, all right, uh, we've got a year or two to play with, and you can write whatever you want. So it's dangerous to give composer complete free reign. Uh, I had always, this piece had been in the back of my mind for probably years. So just idea of kind of a world music flavor and incorporating different styles and different genres, and just kind of as a celebration of the earth rhythms, cycles, nothing really specifically related, but just the idea of capturing as many different uh, styles and textures as I could. It moves from, the pretend rainstorm there in the beginning and sort of an African flavor. Are a lot of clusters. There's some aleatoric sections in there as well. Some huge moments for percussion, building some nice impact points. So
Synthesizer
yeah,
part.
it was a chance to yeah, synthesizer is optional, so there
Yep.
are cues for that. But it's a nice, and he specifically wanted that. He says, "I've got a synthesizer. Can you write me a part?" So that's it's great if you have that. It helps really add a nice flavor to it, but
Yeah.
certainly not required.
I
But
will
yeah,
notice it. No, go ahead.
it was a piece that was fun to do, and it's fun to do that with kids too. It takes a little while to hook together. I mean, it's
Yep,
a little longer than most,
it
what,
is.
maybe 7.5 minutes.
Yep. We're gonna listen to a lot of it because it's a really cool piece. It's super programmatic. Like kids love all the different sounds and all the different the way it changes. Like kids really attach to this piece. You mentioned the percussion. Like the percussion has to be able to play. It's grade three. It's not. I'm not saying it's impossible, but like if you don't have some players, it's not there. To me, it's sort of like a third piece if you're doing a three-piece program. And again, we mentioned this like because there's a slow section to open it, you could consider, and even when it moves to the faster tempo, it's lyrical, right? Throughout that. So you could do this on a program without another ballad and also have this sort of be like your programmatic piece. And it would work. I mean, it could work with a ballad as well. So it's so good. My wife likes it, so I like it. I
There you
also
go.
like it. All right, here's Earth Dance. Okay, so the next three we're going to listen to all also have a lot of percussion. Quad City Stomp is a grade 3 and it has 7 percussion.
This one was a unique piece. In the midst of writing this piece, my mom passed away, and then I found out later that the band director who commissioned the piece, his wife passed away at that same time. So in the middle of the piece, kind of all work stopped and dealing with a lot of family things. So it's kind of a segmented piece. You clearly hear different styles. I mean, the first part of it is kind of a romp for percussion and low and middle voices. Then the back half, there's a transitional section. Then it's kind of a Celtic flavor at the end. So I explained to the director, that's, hey, I'm sorry it's taking a lot long. My mom passed away, and I'm getting back at it here. And I said, by the way, the second half of the piece is kind of taking on a Celtic flavor, so I hope that's okay. And he said, well, by the way, he explained that his wife had passed away and that she was very Irish, so that was certainly okay. So it was kind of a surreal situation that, well, yeah, maybe our family members are kind of looking after us here on this. So it's an emotional piece for me, and I've done it a number of times with honor bands. It does really end at a Celtic celebration, lots of percussion. Like the other pieces, there's a strong emotional growth from top to bottom. So I think it takes you a lot of different places, lots of different variety and styles in this as well. But I think at the end, it's a fun piece for kids to play.
And I'm going to ask your opinion on this one. Would you like me to play more of the first part of the piece or more of the end of the piece, or a little bit of both?
Maybe, yeah, a little. I would do a little bit of the beginning and then skip to the end. The fast section starts kind of interesting. You've got a kind of a Celtic percussion pattern with the flute melody without any chords, and then the percussion drop out entirely. And you hear just a harmony. So you hear harmony by itself, and then the percussion, the melody comes back in. So it's kind of a different kind of a format where you present the melody, present the chords separately, and then you hook them together and kind of build from there to the end.
All right, here is Quad City Stomp. Okay, so the next one is we're into the grade 4 at this point, Rumble on the High Plains. And I sort of think of this a little bit like Earth Dance because there's the storms in the plains of Kansas, right? That you can hear all that stuff.
Oh, sure.
But it's
Yeah.
also very percussion heavy, like What Stomp.
This one predates Earth Dance, five years, I believe, commissioned from School of Kansas, and they're out on the plains. So yeah, just the imagery of either thundering buffalo herds or storms or things coming across the plains. There are a lot of really interesting spots in here, including a percussion duel that some bands tend to stretch that out depending on how long they want this duel to go on. And there's some interesting vocal effects. There's hissing behind the percussion duel that the band members do, and some shouts, and just some kind of outrageous things. Harmony is a lot different, a lot of chordal harmony rather than traditional harmonies. There's spread out chords and then collapse them in those same notes into a cluster. So I tried some different types of compositional techniques in this one as well. Middle section, the slow section has got, where the clarinets are given 3 notes, they can use any rhythm. So they're creating kind of a bubbling undercurrent, and then the melody is over the top of that. So again, trying to come up with different types of sounds and different types of textures. The ending is a real celebration. It's the piece starts in minor, ends up in major, and it's kind of the percussion lead all the way.
That's great. So if you're listening and you have a band where the percussion is really strong, grade 4 level, this might be a really good one. How many percussionists off the top of your head do you remember that do you need? Are we in the 7, 8?
We're 7 minimum. I think there are 8 or 9 possible, but you can combine some parts if you need to. But I think 6 or 7 would be needed.
Great. Here's Rumble on the High Plains. All right, and the last piece we're going to do for concert band with you is Star Dance. I'm always in the mood for some good 7/8. I mean, Slava only goes so far, so you kind of need some more some more 7/8. This has a lot of solos. One of them I noticed, which is soprano sax. So I have some friends who are rolling over right now, but I think soprano sax, when played well, can be done very appropriately.
I suppose you could substitute that with something else, but the soprano sax is such a distinctive sound. Yeah, this piece is a little bit longer. I think it's nine-ish minutes.
Yep,
And another one of those cases where the director kind of gives me free rein to his peril. Uh, the idea at the beginning here is all of the band except percussion are put out into the audience. So
that's
they're
super cool.
creating this kind of a star dancey kind of flavor where they're given notes to play and it kind of bounces off. And I think it's kind of a unique experience for the audience. So you've got these band kids all around them. Percussion stays up on the stage, but that's I don't know how much of the beginning you can play, but it starts random, but then ends up in a real nice lush chorale. Then the percussion come in with your 7/8. Actually, it's 3 bars of 7/8 and a bar of 9/8. That's
Yep.
the pattern. And it's an open-ended vamp to give, depending on how far your kids have to travel to get back up on stage. I tried to build in some extra
Yeah.
travel time there, but from there it really drives that meter section is pretty intense. Starts out pretty much the whole band, then plays it in unison before breaking out into other parts. Middle section is very jazzy, lush chords. You can have your soloists stand up. They have just little short phrases that play off of one another. Then the fast section returns into the end. But yeah, I tried to stretch a lot of different compositional techniques and
Yeah.
sounds in this one too.
Question I had, say a band director liked this piece and wanted to do it, but for whatever reason was not able to make the students in the audience and all that happen. Is it still worth doing? Does it have a similar effect, even though it's not what you intended?
Yeah, oh yeah, they can if they don't want to move, they can either off stage or they can just play from where they're sitting too. That's certainly fine
Okay.
too. It's a lot cooler if they can get out in the
Of course
audience.
it is. All right, here's grade 4 Star Dance. right, Michael, thank you so much for taking us through all that music. We are going to do a second episode coming up next week, the second half of this, which will be all of the jazz ensemble stuff, different grade levels as well. Great music, just a completely different style of side of things. What is some repertoire that you like to use that's not yours, that you do a lot in honor band, maybe some older pieces?
Sure. There's seems to be a couple that I go to a lot. For an opener, I use Richard Saucedo's "Into the Clouds" a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a short but really impressive. Probably grade 2.5. It does involve a lot of percussion.
That's the 3/4 one, right?
No, yeah, that's 3/4. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's only about 2 minutes, but it's an exciting piece to open a concert.
Piano
Uh,
piece, piano part two. I remember that.
that one doesn't. No, I don't believe
Doesn't.
that one does. No,
Okay.
some of his others do, but I think that one may have an optional. That may be optional piano part.
I feel like
Most
my
of his,
wife. I feel like my wife did it, and she used a piano player.
okay, that could be. Uh, Another one that for a march I use a lot, John Ebbenson's Normandy Beach, which goes back, oh man, 30, 40 years maybe.
Wow.
And it's a real nice kind of a cologne, not no, it's kind of a more of a British slower style march, and it starts flute solo or flutes with percussion, and it builds and then it tapers at the end. So it's kind of a different style format of the march, but it gives every section a chance to play some melody, and it's nicely constructed. And I found that's always a very effective, little different type of sounding march.
What's the grade level of that?
That's a grade 2, maybe. I think it's back the time where the scoring is more grade 3 scoring, because I think it has 3 trombone parts,
Okay.
3 trumpets, 2 horns, but 2.5, probably closer to 2.5. There are some tricky little woodwind things, but that's been a nice little off the beaten path march that I like to use a lot. And one that's probably the oldest piece that I like to use is a piece called "Folklore for Band." Uh, Jim Andy Caudill, Caudill, is the composer. And it's a piece that when I first started with Hal Leonard in 1982, I noticed that this piece, Folklore for Band, kept showing up on sales reports. And without any special promotion or advertising, it was selling, a fair chunk of copies every single year. And I finally listened to it, and I found out why. It's just a really nice, maybe a 5 minute grade 3 overture, kind of modal, kind of British style. Very attractive. Wherever I've done it, kids just love it. And I think it's kind of off a lot of people's radar, but man, it's one that I like to use a lot.
Is it still in print?
Yes. Yep.
Right.
We actually, when it first came out, I think 64, 65, it only had a condensed score. So later we completely re-engraved it with a full score. I was able to get in touch with Mr. Caudill, and he provided some additional program notes. So we did dress it up. It's still in the catalog and doing really well. So I'd encourage people to give it a listen. There's a great recording by a Japanese band on our website, on the YouTube channel, that they can hear the piece.
I'll check it out. Sweet. Well, thanks very much again to people. Next week we'll do Mike again. We'll have all the jazz stuff. How can people reach out to you if they'd like to?
They can certainly reach my Hal Leonard email, which is just msweeney@halleonard.com. You can certainly reach me that way.
Great. Well, thanks very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kyle. Great being with you today, and good luck to everybody.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.